Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we've got some pretty big news in that Blizzard has just announced some nerfs for the Witchwood. There's going to be 6 cards that they're changing. There's going to be some huge nerfs to the Warlock class, for example, which I think is needed. Overall, I think they made some pretty good changes. So let's take a look at the cards, and we'll also have a look at some of the decks which are being affected by this. But firstly, I just want to say, I think when Witchwood came out, I think it was a really good expansion. There was loads of new decks being tried. There was lots of variety on the ladder. But unfortunately, what had happened was after people had stopped testing the cards and playing around, it kind of settled on a meta where people understood exactly what the most powerful cards were, and they were more powerful than a lot of the rest of the game. So it did create a bit of a stale meta for the last couple of weeks. So I'm happy that they're going to be making these changes, and overall I would say I agree with them. So let's start with Warlock, and clearly Warlock is one of the best classes in the game right now, and I think they do need a nerf. And thankfully, they aren't nerfing Possessed Lackey. So this is the 5-mana 2/2 that shows a Death Rattle of Recruit a Demon. Now the card on its own seems okay, but the problem was with the other cards in Warlock's class, they could quite easily draw out a Void Lord on turn 5 if they manage to coin their Dark Pact. They can do that, and then you can't even silence it, so there isn't a reply. And suddenly, early on in the game, they've either got a Doom Guard, which is incredibly powerful, not only because it has charge that turn, but also because when it dies, it just means you can also bring it back with Gul'dan, and also if you bring it out, it means you can cube it and then have more Doom Guards, which will summon back when you get Gul'dan. So all of that seems a little bit unfair, and what they're doing is all they're changing is just increasing it to 6 mana. Now I think this is quite a good nerf because we've seen quite a lot of Warlock, but we don't want to completely kill the class. I think it's quite a fun deck to play. Cube Warlock, Control Warlock, I think are both fun decks to play. I think they're interesting to play against as well because there's lots of different strategies if you understand what cards they've got and when they're going to play them and when you can play yours. I think it's quite fun to play against both. But this just makes it a little bit more fair. And I think it becomes more fair because it makes everything happen a turn later. So they can still play the Lacky on 5 if they have the coin. They can coin it out and play it, but they can't play it with their Dark Pact. So that does give you an opportunity to silence it or kill it and maybe remove whatever comes out if it's a Doom Guard, for example. And delaying things by a turn in Hearthstone is actually pretty huge because not only does it allow your player to draw another card, it also allows them to have access to more AoE spells. So I really quite like this change. I think it's gonna it's not going to kill Warlock. It might mean people play less Cube Warlock and go more down the control route, but it's not going to kill them. I just think it's going to make the result of drawing a Possessed Lackey a bit more fair. And also, along with this, another problem is the Dark Pact. Now, Dark Pact is, for 1 mana, getting 8 healing is incredible in Hearthstone. It's even more incredible in Warlock because they need it, because a lot of their cards deal damage to themselves, drawing cards as well, their hero power. So the healing is really, really important. So for 1 mana, being able to restore yourself for 8 health, but the downside being you have to kill one of your own minions. Well, the way the cards and the deck's set up at the moment is the downside isn't a downside because they want to kill their own minion. They want to kill that Lackey. So that's why this card was very powerful. And what they're doing is they're changing it now to only restoring 4 health instead of 8. So I think that's a pretty huge change because Warlocks often play 2 of these. So that's 8 healing you're taking out of the game for them. And Warlock has so many ways to heal themselves with the Spellstone, Dark Pact, and Gul'dan when they start playing it, that it often seems quite unfair that you can get very close to winning. They just play their Gul'dan and then they use a couple of Dark Pacts and they're back up to full health. So this change makes Warlock slightly weaker in the long game because they're getting less healing from this card, but also in the short game against aggressive decks because they're not able to restore this huge amount of health just for that 1 mana card. So I think this is a really nice change. 2 changes to Warlock. They're the only 2 that they're being impacted by, but 2 that I think don't kill the deck, they don't kill the class, but make it more fair. And I quite like that because a lot of people will have invested their dust and their gold into Warlock, and now being able to just completely kill the class as Blizzard could do, I don't think is the right step because, like I said, I do quite enjoy this deck, playing against it and playing it. So I'm quite happy with those changes, and it should make these decks a lot more fair. We'll see Void Lords a bit later on in the game. Next up, we're going to talk about Paladin, and specifically Call to Arms. Now, Call to Arms is one of the best cards in the game because for 4 mana you can pull out 3 minions that cost 2 or less, and it's just so much tempo. And you can coin this on turn 3, and because it's an epic card, you can put 2 in your deck, so you could potentially play 1 on 3 and 1 on 4 if you have the coin. It's too powerful. Not only does it pull cards out of your deck that are weaker so that you get to your stronger cards quicker, it also just puts loads of cards onto the deck. Also, if you get Loot Hoarder, you can draw a card from the death rattle of it. It works really well with Knife Juggler, for example, and sometimes it's just too much for people to deal with. And Paladin, I think, needs to be looked at because there's 3 decks right at the very top of the tier list. That is Even Paladin, Murloc Paladin, and Odd Paladin. Now, Odd Paladin wasn't able to use Call to Arms because it was an even card. So now they can, because it costs 5 mana, but of course you can only be able to recruit 3 minions that cost 2 or less, so it's going to be 3 minions that cost 1 mana for 5, and you're paying 5 mana for it now. So I don't think this is a card that is going to go into Odd Paladin. I don't think it's strong enough at 5 mana to draw 3 1-cost minions. So I think it's not going to affect the Odd Paladin as it is, but it will make Even Paladin and Murloc Paladin a lot less powerful. I think this is a huge nerf to them. But it doesn't kill the card. It kills it from Even Paladin, but it doesn't kill it from Murloc Paladin, because I still think that 5 mana for a incredible spell like this, I think is still worth it. Next up is a nerf to the Spiteful Summoner. One which I don't think really needed to happen in the previous expansion. This has always been a really strong card. 6 mana, Battlecry, reveal a spell. Often you can put 10-cost spells in your deck only, and then you get a huge 10-cost minion, which, since the old gods rotated out, is a minimum of an 8/8 or 7/14 if you want to look at it that way with the Ultra Source. So this is really, really strong, and it became really good in Summoner Druid. It also works really well in Summoner Priest. 2 decks which I really like. I like to have that kind of context of building these decks. Building them without spells in that you would almost always put into Druid, for example. So who would have thought about building a Druid deck without Swipe, for example? But with Summoner, you can do that just with Ultimate Infestation. So I like the card, but the reason I think it needs a nerf, and the reason I think this is a good nerf, is that in this expansion, Blizzard introduced a lot of Rush minions, and Rush minions kind of create a way for you to have a removal spell in your deck without it being a spell, for example. So you don't need to have Swipe anymore in Druid, for example, because you can use charge minions which can trade into your opponent's minions. So I think it did need a nerf because those decks were quite strong, and on turn 6 just having this huge minion come down is very difficult. But now they're changing it so it can only come out on turn 7. So again, I think another good nerf, because it's not going to kill the card. I don't think this will kill Summoner Druid. I think Summoner Druid will still be around. I think it makes it worse because it is a turn later. And also you have less mana remaining to be able to spend it on other things. So overall, I think this is a change that needed to be done, and a change which I think they've made quite well. Next up is another nerf to Quest Rogue, and this is quite a big nerf really. So it had already been nerfed once before when it was too powerful. The completion of the quest was changed from 4 of the same minions to 5 of the same minions, and now what they've done is nerfed the actual crystal core that you get. So instead of for the rest of your game your minions being 5/5s, they are now 4/4s, and that is quite a huge change actually, because now, instead of being able to play these charge minions, so the Boar and the South Sea Deckhand with 5 attack, they only have 4 attack, which means that it's going to take them maybe another turn, maybe 2 more turns to actually kill you with that combo. And I quite like this because I don't like having Quest Rogue in the meta. I think it's a good deck. It's a fun deck for if you're playing it. It's great that we've had it in the game and people have tried it, but I don't think it's a good deck to play against, because if you're playing against Quest Rogue, all you're doing is hoping that they don't draw the right cards. Because if they do draw the right cards, you lose. There's not much you can change about your strategy. It's just basically try and kill them before they complete their quest. And if you're playing a really slow deck, then often it's really frustrating because you're just waiting to die. So I think this is another good nerf. It doesn't necessarily kill the deck, but I think changing them to 4/4s means not only can they get less healing from the scale hide, it also takes them longer to kill you. So this, I think, is a good nerf, and probably one which will see people step away from Rogue. Finally, this nerf only affects the wild game because it's a nerf to Naga Sea Witch. Now, this card is really strong in wild because what it does when you play it, it changes the cost of your cards to 5. Now, what people are doing is they make this a giant deck. So if they're playing any of the giants that cost 12 mana, for example, suddenly cost 5, and then the discounts are counted from 5 and not 12. So if you're playing Mountain Giant, for example, and you've got 5 cards in your hand, that Mountain Giant suddenly becomes 0. So it's a way that on turn 5 people can play a lot of giants onto the board, and it's kind of a bit too difficult for anyone to deal with in other classes. So they have nerfed this, and it's now costs 8 mana. So instead of being able to do it on turn 5, you could have to wait until turn 8. So I think this is a good change, and also if you haven't got the right kind of discounts on your giants, you might not necessarily be able to play them if they're not down at 0. So I think this is a good change for wild. It's not a deck that I've tried myself yet, but a lot of people are complaining about it, and it's good to rotate these kind of things and just shake up the meta even when it is in wild. So another good change in my opinion. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. Please leave a like if you did. Let me know in the comments what you think about what I've said, and I'll see you in the next video.